did. So you know how I had told you when I talked with her and I did the Akashic and we were talking about like the 3 years of pain that I've been living in. And
Hmm.
her philosophy was it's like trapped energy trying to rise and come forward, but obviously it can't come forward if you're like in your darkness and in your crap. Um,
Hmm.
but when she was like kind of having me tap into the pain, because everyone says like sit with the pain, don't run from it, let yourself be in like sort of like not let it overtake you, but find a way to get embodied by it. So I've been trying. And so when we were on the call, she's like, what is the pain like what does your pain feel like? And I sat there for a second. I was like, you know what? The pain feels like longing. Like,
Mm.
and that could be longing for anything. But
Yeah.
for me, like I started crying when I was talking to her because I was like,
Mm.
for me, the pain is that longing to get back to a version of myself. Like everyone always says, never look back. But I'm like, but there was a part of me that lived fully embodied and free and had
Mm.
this wild imagination with like no inhibitions. And it was like, everything is open to me. There is no limitations. I imagine it, I
Yeah.
manifest it, and it is.
Yep.
And then, and this wasn't even like just being a kid. This was even in my teens. I had this kind of energy. Like if I wanted a guy, I got the
Yeah.
guy. There was no
Yeah.
question. It was just a matter of when it was going to happen. And then somehow life, pain, crappy relationships, people grow up, stop having expectations. You're going to get disappointed. Then you stop dreaming. So
Yeah.
I'm like that pain is that longing to reconnect to the part of myself that was more free and connected, but also like the longing for a partner
Yeah.
or, more fulfilling relationships in my life. And like the
Yeah.
pain feels like it's, you know, holding on for dear life because it feels safer than feeling everything.
Yeah. When do you think that was? Did you like look back and say like when did I stop dreaming? When did I stop being so expansive?
Oh my gosh.
This is
I think,
super relevant for me too. I'm excited to share in
okay.
a second. Yeah.
Okay, so I think for me, if I think back to like the moment or the time frame, it was that my abusive relationship I had in college. I dated
Mm.
him from like what was it like 18, 19 to 21 and he like destroyed me. Like, even though I had been battling my eating disorder for a couple of years already and was like struggling with my body dysmorphia, I was still so confident. Like, I could just
Yeah.
blaze into a room and I was like, I don't really care. Granted, I was very emotionally disconnected. So there was healing, but there was this
Hmm.
like, this energy that I carried. And then he crushed it. Like,
Yeah.
if I wanted to hold his hand, stop it, you're embarrassing me. If I wanted to be intimate with him, rejected, rejected, rejection.
Hmm.
And then you start to feel like, and he'd be like, I'm more attracted to brunettes, and like then I'm starting to change myself. I don't know who I am anymore. And tolerating not even the bare minimum. Like
Hmm.
I was taking, it's like eating the rotten core of an apple because that was the only thing that was left. And yeah,
Yeah.
that was like the last time.
Yeah. Yeah. Is it like suppression? Is it like constriction? Once you experience that for so long, then it's like hard to expand and get back to dreaming. Yeah.
Seriously. And then when I
Yeah.
left that relationship, and I don't know if I told you this or not, my mom's friend sat me down and, she was like, so Victoria, now what? Like, what does Victoria want? And I kind of looked at her. I was like, what does that mean? Like, what words are
Yeah.
you saying? Because the whole relationship, nobody asked me what I wanted. I was just like,
Hmm.
what he wants, what he desires, and that is what is. Because I
Hmm.
was so like, what is it? Like manipulated, brainwashed, like, I just like accepted that reality. And then I was like, oh, now I have to actually figure out like, who am I? What's my voice? What do I want? What do I want to get back to? And I feel like I'm still on that journey. Like
Yeah.
I still don't fully know. Closer.
Yeah. 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 The journey back to dreaming. I feel like I got a glimpse of this a few months ago after, honestly being reactionary and so forth and, whatever challenges happened through the pandemic and the shift that happened there. But it's like getting back to expansive because the same thing when I was a kid, like take over the world. Obviously when we started the business, we're like taking over the world, multi locations and so forth. And it's like everything shifted. So I'm literally trying to look back at was it landmark time or was it over time, more and more constriction of heart being closed and, eventually like how to get back there, right? Do you have any practices that are top of mind? I know this is new.
Ugh. Honestly, the biggest piece is letting go of the anger at the
Yeah.
masculine that has wrecked me. Because, like, trying to
Hmm.
date again now, you get a couple of good ones, but there's like this desperation in women. And I was talking to my business partner about it yesterday. He's like, "Man, I must have just gotten like really lucky with like my last relationship and this new one because I didn't really have to deal like with this horror stories that I was telling him." I'm like, the thing is, for every like one good man, there's 20 or 30 good women. And they are just clawing their way to get these good ones. So they don't really experience as much horror as we do. So then you're like carrying this, you're not trying hard enough. You're barely doing the bare minimum. I don't trust you. You have a motive. Oh, you just want to sleep with me? Well, screw you. So I
Mm.
think like the biggest thing is just showing up and being indifferent, which
Mm.
sounds super disconnected, but it's like if a guy stops talking to me, all right, whatever, you're lost, not my problem. It's like I don't have to message him to be like, "Blah, blah, 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 let me prove my point to you. Oh, you want to ghost me? Well, let me tell you why ghosting is an asshole thing to do." I'm like, I don't have
Hmm.
to like vindicate anything. I don't have to prove
Hmm.
anything. It's just, oh, you want to walk away? Oh, you did this. Oh, you did that. Like what I started saying to myself is I was like, it doesn't affect my reality. And if it doesn't
Yeah.
affect my reality, then I just don't care about it.
Yeah. Non-attachment.
So trying.
Yeah. Easier said than done, right? Yeah.
Seriously, I mean,
Non-attachment, surrender. I think right now is like the being able
what's
to
coming up in your
receive.
shadow?
Yeah,
Like,
being able to receive for sure. For sure. Like I definitely take responsibility for it in the past and my wounded masculine and all the healing I had to do to where like there was nothing that I could receive from a partner that I wouldn't feel like there needed to be some sort of exchange. And I don't know if this is like my history of growing up poor or like not being a mooch and those types of things, but everything had to feel really transactional in the past. And I can only look back at how my relationships, I never let myself fully feel love. And then I would grow resentment, like this person doesn't really care about me or I'm just serving them in some way. And those types of things where I didn't feel love. But it's like ultimately back to love for myself. Like I couldn't fully receive love, and it's still a struggle, like to receive and be nurtured and those types of things, but expanding into it. But I think it feels a lot different here because I know that to be true. It's like if you don't have love for yourself, if you don't have compassion, if you don't have grace, if you can't nurture yourself, you can't receive that from anybody else. So that's been especially in the beginning, it was an interesting journey. I feel like we're finding our flow in that a little bit more now, but it's still painful to where it's like she's incredible in any nice thing that she does or any way that she wants to nurture. I'm over there going, oh, it's like painful. Like, what can I do? Okay, I'll do this instead. Like, what's the exchange there too, which has been a huge part, a really healing part as well. But the ability to receive is a huge theme.
well, and that's like that makes me think about what I'm going through, and like we all have that, but like the feelings of worthiness, like
Hmm.
you're sitting there feeling like, am I worthy to receive this? But also, can I be a little bit in my feminine? Because the feminine receives, and like you're this, I'm masculine and I'm the dude, and like there has to be this reciprocity. And she's like,
Hmm.
no, receive, sit, let me care for
Hmm.
you, be soft, like let me be in my feminine. But there is also this masculine edge that has to like be chipped away to like where you're both kind of in this feminine energy together. Otherwise, because if like you're too masculine, then she's just
Hmm.
like, are you okay? What's wrong? Because
Yeah.
you're like, all right, that's great, thank you. Like, let me go do some push-ups,
Yeah.
like it's
Yeah.
weird. It's like,
Yeah.
how do
It's
you
huge
feel
too.
worthy?
Yeah, it's huge too because it's like extremely, I have the honor of having deep relationships like with women like yourself, like very powerful women, and she's an extremely powerful woman as well. And it's also like acknowledging that power too, to where it's not, it's in reverence. It's ultimately like head down to where it's like the divine feminine and so forth, all of her giftings and so forth too, to where it's like, all the old framing of men need to lead the relationship, which I do feel like some components there. But at the same point, like acknowledging her power and her divine wisdom and those types of things, and ultimately just like being all ears. Like any powerful close relationships, obviously you being one, where the feminine has something to say, I'm like all ears. I'm like they're channeling. What are they saying to me? Like wisdom, like deep, deep wisdom, rather than like holding it together, transactional relationships, this and and so forth, to where like it really can feel like a flow. So it's been a whole thing. It's been a whole thing. Thanks for going there, V.
You're welcome anytime. But it like, and it's like kind of from our conversations that we've had before, right? Like the feminine has been bastardized all throughout history because of the power that they possess. You can wash them from books, from scriptures, like put them in this place of like, you're something
Hmm.
that I barter for power
Hmm.
without realizing that, there's like, I think about that story with like Helen of like she was originally bartered, but then she fell in love with Paris and, wanted to run off and cause this whole war. Like, not only do women create wars, but love, but also
Hmm.
there's that energy of you can't keep what's not yours.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that in like the Paris sense. I'm saying that,
Yeah.
when you abuse the feminine and you treat them like a product, then they will destroy that which
Yeah.
sought to control them.
Yeah. Yeah, and I resonate with myself too, like deep, deep reverence for the feminine and, a long history of being unhealed myself and a amount of hurt, whatever projection I could have done to anybody else or restriction that I might have caused them or constriction. And it's like, what eventually happens with that much constriction or suppression and those types of things? Like eventually it's going to blow and it's going to create chaos in probably the most beautiful way. It needs to expand and create that as well. But even my own sense too, to where like I was constricted, right? We talk about like the heart being open, the heart chakra being open. It's like your shoulders need to be back, your chin needs to be up. What do we look like when we're in shame or unworthiness? We're like this and our shoulders are in.
Mhm.
So it's really like to expand and constrict. And if there's full expansion and we're in our heart, then there's no constriction and there's nothing that's not for us. Or if it's not for us, like surrender and not attachment to it. But I feel like anytime we're white knuckling anything, we're no longer in the position to receive, and the same thing. If we're constricted, we're no longer to able to receive what's for us too. So way easier said than done sometimes, but
Right? Because it's
expansion.
like, yeah, it's like that remembrance. And even in expansion, it's like how you said, like you're shriveled like this. And they always say, keep like carry yourself, dress the way that you want to be seen, put yourself together, show up into the world, even if you're having a bad day, for a girl, a little bit of makeup, a little lip gloss, like your energy is a like a currency. So if
Hmm.
you're having a bad day, that's fine, but like dress up a little bit, change the frequency
Hmm.
because it makes me think of even like I don't even know if I shared this with you from our Aya ceremony, but like stepping into the embodiment of who you are and claiming yourself kind of said like what does Victoria want? And I was like
Hmm.
I want to know myself again. I want to be
Hmm.
confident in myself and so grounded and secure that
Hmm.
even if a man or a this or a that, and I've gotten better over the years at not crumbling at the slightest, comment or rejection. But it's like, how do I stand embodied in myself in the remembrance of my truth, my power, and like the the history of women that have come before me that are in this line that walk with me. And in the Aya ceremony that we did together, like my friend had given me this like crystal talisman kind of thing, and I took it with me. And like what I don't remember the exact like the story that played out, but I was really, really stuck, because obviously if you're resisting or you're scared, like it hurts. And so I'm sitting there and I was like, I feel like I can't breathe. I want this to be over. Like I literally felt like I was suffocating, which is such a
Hmm.
correlation, I feel like, to this pain that I have that I've been living with. But it was like I felt myself restricting and I was like, oh my God, I'm gonna just die in this ceremony. And I remember rolling over and I like grabbed the like this talisman that my friend gave me and I was like channeling it, but I was holding it like a wand and a scepter. Like it literally
Hmm.
felt like my shield.
Hmm.
And there was this like I guess this voice or this thing and it just kept asking me, "Who are you? Who are you? Who do you like, over and over." And I was like holding it like death grip, but like I felt so embodied with it. And you know how some people in ceremonies or as they go through stuff, through life, they'll change their name or they're like, well, I have this name, but I connect with this. And I
Hmm.
was sitting there and I was like, is there another name? Like, do I feel like someone else? And I was like, no. I was like, I am
Come on.
Victoria Courtney Magnus. And I kept
Come on.
saying it over and over and like embodying it. And I was like, this is my truth. Like,
Yeah.
this is who I am in this lifetime. This is who I not only want to like grow to remember, but I want to show the world in like the truest form that all of this shit from the past, all of these people and
Yeah.
circumstances and things that like wanted to break me, they were just helping me piece together the parts of myself to be like, no, nope, still here, but better. Still
Yeah.
here, but stronger. And it's like the hardest piece is the remembrance. Like there's the
Yeah.
remembrance and then there's the claiming.
Yeah. Yeah. Remembrance. Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, similarly, obviously, we've got to catch up about that ceremony, and what a beautiful experience to share with you your first Aya ceremony and so forth. But it was the same thing on my end in a different way too, to where it was like, night one was easier, it was beautiful, it was peaceful. This whole relationship was struggle on my end, to where it's like, does this need to be difficult? Like, are we just programmed to think that this is tough and these experiences are tough? And I went in night one, and it didn't feel like out of ego, but maybe it was because night one was a full, ego death. But and then having that really difficult time night two, where it was just so much energy, just so much energy. It wasn't that I needed to purge. It wasn't anything like that. It was just like overwhelming amount of energy. And I remember the whole night I was like sitting with it, having the worst time. I remember like you obviously were on the mat next to me, and I literally was crippled on my mat, and all I wanted to do was reach for Josh and go do hop in. I couldn't even muster the words to call over and get out of the experience, and it was just full. I just had to fully surrender into it. And then I remember I tapped into it, and I was like, "What is this energy?" Like breathe through it and actually feel it, and it was good. It was good energy, and it was like that whole integration that you helped me with, and different experiences, to where it was like, "What is pleasure?" And obviously you got big downloads that night as well, in regards to that. But it was like my relationship with struggle, that I'm like feeling good experiences, being joyful. I remember anytime I'd go on a trip or anything like that, it'd be hard for me to be present. Like I couldn't really like enjoy my time away because of duties, judgment of others, things like that, feeling like I always just need to grind all the time. And just getting back to like experiencing life in a full expansive way. I did the name thing as well. Like I go by my middle name, and I was like I think I had some resistance with James, my first name, and I feel called to call that back. And I don't know if it was resentment or anything with my father and what that name might have represented, but it was like just remembering fully who I am in my power. It's like all the expansiveness. Like I don't, we are worthy, we're whole exactly where we're at, but right back to that remembrance of like we can feel expansive. And the minute that I was constricted and my head was down and my heart wasn't open, that was potentially how I lived my whole life. But I remember there was a big shift, probably around the pandemic, when when all the gyms were shut down and stuff. But now it feels different. And the minute I had that radical experience with my dog passing, felt like my heart was fully blasted open. I was in purely in my heart. That's when radical stuff started coming through, to where it's like we get to do this A because it's good for ourselves, but we also get to do it because what are we withholding to come to us? Because we're not open to receive it either, you know?
Yeah, well, it's like, it takes me back to that whole like, because like you said, you were struggling. There was like struggle in the ceremony. You're like, oh my God, I feel like I'm dying. But it's like there's that struggle and that pain. And like I said earlier, like from the Akashic reading, like pain is longing. And then there's like the pain of remembering, the pain of reconnecting, and the whole thing, again, like we're always on parallel paths, like, the struggle with our name. And it's like, can I be all of this? Like, am I not, there's like this deservedness, but then there's also, in your sense, like that struggle with the name of like, where do I differentiate the two? Like, where does one end and the other begin? Because we're so tied to, our family and our lineage and generational trauma and healing all of this. And it's like, where does that story end? Where does ours begin? And then where
Mhm.
do we know where to cut cords and which ones do we follow?
Mm, that's it. That's
Yeah.
it. Yeah. It's just also, yeah, it's just like back to that constriction too. It's like if I'm constricted and I'm not ready to receive, no wonder like I was so resistant to everything. It's like everything I was resistant to. It's like whatever that illusion of control. It's like I can control and resist. Like if hard, difficult things come up, I'm not gonna feel stressed. I'm like, let's get to work and I'll work it. And like if I'm sad, I'm gonna like resist that and be like, no, stay in light, stay in gratitude, this and that. And then it's also on the flip side to that, to where it's like I was resisting all the good things and things that could be before me because my self-sabotaging beliefs or whatever it might be. And it's like obviously that I'm deeply into Kabbalah and like energetics and obviously hermetics and so forth, but it's like anything that we imagine, any desire that we have is because the creator, God, universe wants that for us. And it's like we just need to get out of the way of clinching the pipeline to us with our limiting beliefs and so forth. It's like we're taking that garden hose and we're cranking it with this restriction. And it's like the minute that I felt that open up, it's like everything came in the most miraculous way to where it's like, highs and lows and kind of getting back into old patterns, but shorter times there, but remembering quicker.
Yeah.
Back to that. So,
That makes me think of that. I don't know where I saw it, but that there's like that symbol of the snake restricting around the knife, or the sword.
mm,
And it's like, you
yeah,
will hurt me. Like, I've got this under control. And it's just like, but you're bleeding. Like,
yeah,
just let it
yeah,
go. And then like the
yeah.
pain stops and you're like, but I
Hmm.
can't. Because if I
Hmm.
let go, then what happens? Like, where do I go? Where do I fall to?
Hmm.
And it's like, but isn't that the most wonderful part is that you
Yeah.
don't know and you just go into it. And
Hmm.
I know for me, that's been so challenging because when we all go through trauma, we all know what happens and we know suffering. So we spend most of our lives avoiding suffering. I won't go after this deal because I could lose my money. I won't pursue this relationship because I could get my heart broken. And I lived so many years of my life like that because after my dad died and I watched my mom suffer and struggle and grieve the love of her life, my logic was, okay, this is not worth it. I will shut my heart off. I will not love. I will just have superficial relationships because I refuse to like endure that pain. Like I would rather feel nothing than feel everything. But
Hmm.
with that comes a numbness and also you're just floating through life. You're just kind of ghosting in it until you finally stop fighting and you realize that the whole point of the human experience is, you can't only just have joy, bliss, and pleasure and happiness and that and whatnot, because then it's boring. It's the
Hmm.
same old, and if you just
Right.
chase more and more highs and it's never enough. But of course, then people get stuck on the other side because they're like, this is as good as it's gonna
Hmm.
get. Woe is me. I think you're in this reality. And, being a human is balancing both and realizing, I appreciate love because I've lost. I
Yeah.
appreciate my successes because
Hmm.
I have struggled and I have suffered, and for people who've been homeless or not had food, like whatever the circumstance is, there's such a innocence to their appreciation. It's like you can have the littlest but you are so happy because the flip side. And I think a lot of
Yeah.
people get that and they want to stay in one side or the other, and that's why they suffer, and that's why
Yeah.
they don't let go and they bleed.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and also a huge shift that was there too is like we talked about the polarity, right? So it's like, of course, everybody wants joy, happiness, and so forth, but it's like you wouldn't even know what that is if there wasn't the polarity of the opposite emotion or opposite interaction. And it's like, in Kabbalah, they deeply, deeply celebrate any of the hard challenges or any of those things that come up. They celebrate it because in the thought process is that it's expanding your vessel, right? These are like challenging times to expand your vessel so you can have more come in. So literally celebrating when challenging times hard come or sadness. And I don't think that's like spiritual bypassing in the sense of like not let you feel the sadness or feel, those types of things. Living without fear is a huge shift for me, but it's also like celebrating that because it's like this creation, everything is perfect. This plane of existence that we're living on is chaos, and that's how it was designed. And we're here to grow and stretch and expand our vessel, and that's what it's here for. So instead of being like, my old framing of this is bad, everything's a war, enemy, this or that, against darkness and so forth, it's like darkness is serving us just as much as the light is. And I would love to live happy and bliss every single day and so forth. But like getting back to the point of having gratitude of those challenging times and those little deeper and heavier, feelings and emotions, because it's literally serving us just as much. And if we don't have that polarity, we wouldn't feel the highest of joys, we wouldn't feel the highest of love and so forth without knowing what that other ended polarity is. So it's like when we go deeper, I mean, there's sometimes I definitely don't resonate with the victim mindset, but there's been some times where I'm like, man, my path, like the things that I've gone through, like and so forth, like people don't get it. This is too much. Like what's too much? But if you gave me the opportunity before we came here, if we were a limitless being with the divine, and like you said, hey, you were going to come to earth and you were going to feel the highest of highs of joys and happiness, but you're also going to feel the lowest of lows of sadness and pain and suffering as well. Would you sign on for it? We did, in the sense to where it's like the shift in the reframe against like this is too much and this is too stressful and this is too dark and too much, like unfair, rather than like great. If I get to go that deep into those extremes in polarity, I get to experience this high of heightens of the other ones that we obviously desire as well, you know?
And I think that's why we choose to come down, right? We always talk about what's your soul contract? Why is this the path that I'm going through? And it makes me think of all like the one specific ketamine journey that I had done, where, I'm sitting there completely out of my body, just back in like the endlessness of spirit, feeling nothing, being nothing, trying to like talk to my consciousness, being like, oh, yeah, we're a human and we walked here and we paid for this service. And the voice is like, what's money? I'm like, what do you mean, what's money? And then I try to explain money to like my consciousness, and I have no words for it because I'm not like physically in my body attached to a human experience anymore. And I was like, okay, well, let's forget that. Well, we're here. We came to do this ketamine because we're trying to fix the pain in our body and understand it. And I literally, it's like I could feel spirit smiling, and they're just like, what's pain? And it's like trying to explain something to a kid. And I was like, I don't even have the verbiage. I was like, it's the opposite of, but how do I even explain the opposite? Because if you don't know pain, then there really isn't a emotion that you emote for joy because you just are. It just is.
Mm,
And, so then you're like, oh, well, that's why I chose to come down, even though I knew that this was my life, but I was going to forget it all the second I was born. But there was going to be all of this. And if I chose to accept it and learn from it and then embody it, I get to understand and appreciate being human and see each part with
mhm,
gratitude. Like you and I always talk about now, like, how can I show up in presence in each moment? And I think with that presence comes the gratitude of thank you for allowing me to feel this pain, this pleasure, this sadness, and be fully present in it. Because we're always
mhm.
running, whether it's from
Yeah,
like having an addiction, using social media to numb, TV, whatever it is, like we don't have presence in those moments. Instead of allowing ourselves, like for me, to sit in my pain in my body, I'm running to a therapy or a modality that's like hitting me at just the surface, just to
mhm,
have enough so I can manage life at a 7. But I
mhm.
never get to go back to just being like, but if you really sat with it and you could be back at a 2, wouldn't that be
Yeah,
amazing? But it's like, but it's
yeah,
gonna hurt. And it's
yeah.
like, yeah, you're welcome.
Mhm.
Because then when it doesn't hurt, you get to truly embody and enjoy with deep presence and gratitude what it means to be expansive,
Yeah.
to be embodied. And
Mhm.
right now, I'm struggling with stepping into full embodiment because I'm slowly starting to sit with my pain and do the work that is required of it to transmute whatever's been sitting here for 3 years
Mhm.
so that I can alchemize it and step in and remember and
Yeah.
appreciate.
Yeah. Yeah, it's also interesting. I mean, that's such a beautiful reflection. It's also like interesting too, where it's like how much pain and suffering have I caused myself or I went through just being out of pure presence as well, right? Because if I like, tap in fully in this moment, I know you've had experiences before. Most people that have, done any sort of medicine journey or anything like that have felt experiences even without it to where they would be in an experience with someone, all of a sudden they look at their phone and they're like, what the heck? Like only 2 minutes have passed by, but it feels like hours or lifetimes that we've been in this experience and so forth. And, time really only being in this 3D plane, but it's like if I'm fully tapped in right now to this moment and I'm just tapped in with you and giving you full presence. I know like, definitely in the church and, obviously my Christian upbringing and so forth, it was like everybody would talk about, I want to hear from God. I heard from God and all these types of things. And I remember I used to get so frustrated because I was like, I've never heard God's audible voice. Do I think that can happen? God, universe? 100%. I never have. And I was getting so frustrated because I was like, I want to hear from God. And then we think about it. If we all are sons and daughters of God in the universe and fragments of creator and source, it's like, what's the number one way you think God, universe, creation speaks to us? Through other fragments of his sons and daughters as well. So it's helped me tap in so much to where I'm like, especially when I can think about how many things I got to get to do and so forth, maybe feeling impatient or anxious. And I'm like tapped in. I'm like, this is a daughter of God speaking right now. Like, A, you've been such a divine source and guide for me for so long, but like, B, it's like full presence in this moment. There's no
Yeah.
forward or back. So it's like right now I'm safe. Like right now, like, is there pain? Like right now, is there anxiousness? Like right now, everything in this moment is totally perfect. The minute I start going forward, that's anxiousness and fear. When I start going back, it's sadness, resentment, like regret, whatever it looks like. It's like if I'm right here, full presence is it. Even in my work, everything like that too, to where it's been such a huge shift where it's like it's full presence, back to my breath. And the breath has been a huge shift to me too, where like there's so many different techniques with breath work. You know, I've been a nerd with breath work for a long time, but just even counting my inhales and how slow my exhales are. It's like if I just start counting that, all of a sudden I tap in, I can tell I get back to my higher vibration and full presence because it's just, you know, ultimately I'm bringing my attention to that. But it's been a huge shift out of any anxiety, fear, pain, and all that too. So the presence key has just been such a big hack. You know, that's a theme so alive for me. But the polarity, you know, I kind of want to bounce back to the polarity too, because it's interesting. Because like we talked about respecting this emotion, and that ultimately has an opposite on the emotion scale as well, right? And even if I were to work with someone on their core values and so forth, I'd be like, who are you? Right? That was the most difficult question I ever got to ask way before I had my awakening or anything like that. I was like, I don't know. Outside of my work and what I do, I'm like, I don't know how to answer that. So typically what I would do is I would ask, what are the things that make you the most angry? Right? Can you give me an example? Like the thing that makes you so mad,
Ooh, disrespect.
disrespect, right? So if I were to go on the opposite end of the polarity, it sounds to me like respect is one of your top like core values. Whether you show respect to others and them showing respect to you too. But that polarity can be such a huge tool for us to analyze both ends of the spectrum too, you know, to where it's like, I feel really, really, really sad, right? Like if I'm deep in that emotion, it's like ultimately it's pointing towards either something out of alignment or something for us to enjoy on the other end too, right? Does that make
Hmm.
sense?
Yeah, it does, because it's like once we start to figure out, who we are outside of how we make money in this world, or and a lot of people, they just say what they think other people want to hear, so they're relatable and connected, and it's disingenuous. So for me, the other point with respect is also being in integrity,
Mm,
because you can't really have one without the other, because if you don't have
hmm.
integrity, then you're not showing up as yourself, you're not in
Yeah,
full presence, which is
yeah,
disrespectful, not only to yourself, your soul, to whatever divine being you believe in, God, goddess, earth, Gaia, whatever people connect most deeply to. You're disrespecting yourself, and you're disrespecting the energy of the creator that put you here to be your absolute truest self.
right.
So to really connect with the emotions of what is the embodiment of me, how do I want to show up before my feet even hit the ground? And it's like, I want to show up in integrity. And then you spend the whole day figuring out, well, what's integrity? What does that look like for me in the presence of every single moment? Is it the integrity of when someone's like, how are you? And you're like, not well,
Mm,
instead of being like, fine.
you're right.
Like, that's disrespectful, because you're not. You're
Yeah.
lying to yourself, and then you're prolonging your suffering. Because sometimes
Hmm.
maybe you all just like needed someone to be like, I'm so sorry to hear that. Like, do you
Right.
need anything? And you're like, huh, I don't, but thank you for even caring. And then
Yeah.
all of a sudden you feel a little bit better.
Yeah.
So I think, like, and this is something I want to start now, even like practicing more for myself. It's like, how do I maintain my integrity in every moment of presence, in every
Yeah.
interaction with a person or with an experience that I have to go through, and for you,
Yeah.
like you said, breath is so important. And, your relationship with the divine has slowly been changing, because we've all sort of been indoctrinated with God as this power source to fear. But God is just another tier in like this tree of life web that is, for me, it's stepping more into understanding who the goddess is and the divine
Hmm.
mother. And,
Hmm.
on like connecting with, because you're like, I connect with God. And I was like, I connect with nature, like the
Hmm.
elements, because they
Hmm.
teach us so much too. Breath teaches you and it grounds you. And for
Hmm.
me, I'll go on a walk and I'll just connect with the wind and the water and like all of these things. And I'm like, just, tell me. And when
Yeah.
you listen, it speaks. And for you, it's your breath. Every breath you take, you're getting in resonance with that frequency. And you're like, what does source have for me in this moment of
Hmm.
presence?
Yeah. Yeah. No separation.
No.
Yeah, no separation. And all these unique paths, you know, ultimately lead us back to our truth and oneness, you know, with source. And, you know, even something I heard early on in that was like, the point of respect to where like there's leadership training that is deeply alive for me in a program that I'm working on, but it's like there's a huge difference between coming in and demanding respect, and there's a big difference between earning respect. And a lot of times, in my previous framing, it was like earning respect. How do I do that in service with others and so forth? But there's a different energetic with service out of exchange, right? That's attachment to an outcome, and that's resentment can build. Like, to where the only way I feel like anybody can really funnel out pure respect and admiration is when they feel different, when they're full in authenticity, right? So then we think about authenticity, and I've overanalyzed that too, to where I'm like, what's my authentic self? And then all of a sudden I start hyper analyzing what that looks like and start like framing that in. And then I'm thinking, we are not our personality. Like we are an expansive being, like oneness, and that can flow at any point in time. So like I caught myself really in a spiral, like even how I show up on social or with my people and so forth. I'm like, yeah, I do all these things, but I'm not one of these things. And it's like, what's my full authentic self? And I feel like it's being fully present in this moment, settling in, without fear, not trying to put a facade on or anything like that, and just being fully present. I don't have to worry about any of those things. Like what's alive for me in that pure moment right there. Because I've done different plans and stuff. I'm like, how do I bring up, because that's the most powerful energy we can be in, is our authenticity. And people can feel that, right? And that's where love is. But it's like, you got to love yourself to be fully authentic. Analyzing what your authentic self is not it, because now you're outside of that moment. Anytime we're analyzing that moment, we're outside of it. Like I remember when I was on a medicine journey last year, something came through, and it was like even in the good times, right, where it's like I wish this moment would never end. Can you think of a moment like where you're just like, this is so good, and then you get outside of it and you're like, I wish this moment would never end. The minute you think that, it ended.
Yeah.
You're no longer in it. Like the minute that we're outside and analyzing the scenario rather than everything is perfect in this moment, even bad things. It was supposed to happen, it didn't happen any other way. Like everything is perfect. Then you can be fully present. Then I can be my full authentic self, because analyzing that isn't it either. So like the respect thing is like I feel like it really, really grounds it in you really, really loving yourself. And that was like kind of the program as well. And then demanding respect isn't it? Because friction meets friction, force
Mhm.
meets force. And it's like if you are just fully present, fully authentic, and in flow, like everybody will feel that. Everybody will feel that. And it's admirable, People want that. So that was fully alive for me as well. Um, Good shit, B.
Well, and I mean, I think, anything that we demand, then you have to sit there, like you challenge it, and it's like, okay, well, why are you demanding it? Are you afraid?
Hmm.
Are you feeling shame? Because how you were saying before, there's always the polarity of the other side. And I think a lot of people, when they rule with fear and this deep control and this power, it's like, you're not like there is no true ruler in there, because
Hmm.
it's disingenuous, it's hurtful,
Yeah.
and you're letting everybody know, I am here, I'm going to control you because I know that without it, I won't have you. Or they think that love and respect isn't enough. But some of the greatest warriors through history, some of the greatest kings and presidents, they ruled with their hearts with love, and people
Hmm.
saw that, they felt that. But the second
Yeah.
there's fear and there's control and there's punishment to keep people at a line of I am here but you are here, then there is rebellions,
Hmm.
there's sieges or whatever it is. I
Hmm.
think of like immediately like Joan of Arc, stepping
Hmm.
forward as like a martyr for a cause bigger than herself, which is how do we
Hmm.
get back to love? That's
Yeah.
all it ever is. And if the ruler in place will not do it, then the fates will balance it out and someone will step forward and say, no, 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 it is time to correct. Like this cannot keep existing, because the more there is this, the more that the earth destroys herself, and the people
Hmm.
within it are thrown into turmoil and chaos because the energy
Hmm.
is like and
Yeah.
it can't exist. So there is someone that comes forward and goes, sure, there might be pain, some death, some destruction, some lives lost, but the end goal is to get us back into a frequency of love.
Hmm. Yeah. That's it. And like back in something I even heard too is like the sense of urgency and fear. Like if we can expand outside of those, I truly believe our consciousness does not live on this plane. We are tethered in, quantum physics, science, all this is proving this now. But we're tethered into this avatar body, right? So in belief system, like, a lot of individuals deal with the fear of death, but it's like when you fully can receive that we are limitless souls, and obviously, like many different ancient texts, I think any different ancient text will resonate with this to where it's like you will see, the biggest thing I could see is like mourning a loved one, right? So like whether it's you, whether it's, Jamie, whether it's any of my close friends, anything like that, it's like if we were to pass, like even the Bible talks about you'll see souls, like you'll recognize souls as well, right? So it's like if this avatar body is just a skin suit, not to be too morbid, but it's like outside of that, in time and urgency, if there's no urgency or anything, like everything in this moment, everything is perfect, you can really let go of fear. And that brings you back to full presence. And then ultimately, that's where your consciousness lives on that plane, and that's where healing, and that's where creativity, and that's where expansiveness happens. But when we're so stuck on this 3D plane right here of fear and urgency, or we could screw something up or anything like that, it's like we're so disconnected from any of the expansiveness that we desire to. So it's like fear and urgency, those are always like my two keys right now. It's like my feeling urgency, like I'm going to run out of time, right?
Mm.
Like time is only on this 3D plane of existence with chaos and so forth, but it's also on that flip side of not being afraid. What's the worst that could happen? And that sounds morbid, but literally I've went down that tunnel before where I felt like anxiety or fear, and I'm literally just analyzed the worst case scenario.
Yeah.
And the worst case scenario isn't even that bad. It isn't even that bad. Like I used to say one of my superpowers was like growing up super poor and in a trailer and so forth, because attachment to risk and money, it doesn't feel that heavy to me because I'm like, what's the worst case that can happen? Like I grew up with low money and parents' cars getting repoed and stuff like that. And I'm just like, I still had an okay childhood. Like we still did it and we could still grow out of it and so forth. To where it's like the worst case isn't even that bad. I'd be curious how many worst cases we actually manifest in real time, because we are creating and sending that energy out too. To where it's like, what's the best that could happen?
Yeah. Well, and also there's, like that beautiful, going back to like attachment, right? Because we can get too attached to the human experience where, we'll use death, for example. You can get so attached to a loved one that you fear their death. And this is something I struggle with my mom is like, I'm still figuring out how to let go of my attachment to her as my human mom in this existence and like my ability to continue on without her. There's a little bit of, this attachment and this identity with codependency, but in what you shared, about how you grew up, it's like you have this detachment, where you're like, I was without, I have, and I can be okay without again. But it's a healthy detachment. And for me, I have this unhealthy attachment. So it's like we have both sides of like
Hmm.
the polarities, but
Hmm.
it's like, you're able to be in the presence of like, I can have this. I know what it's like to not have it. I'm okay either way, but I'm choosing to continue because a lot of people who might have grown up like you, they would be so attached to the fear of losing and ending up there again that they make no decisions. They have
Hmm.
their money or they have their wealth or whatever they've accumulated and they won't do anything else with it because
Hmm.
they don't want to risk sabotaging anything. And
Hmm.
that need, again, right, we go back to the snake holding on to the knife, that restriction around it. It's like you are bleeding yourself from the magnitude that is waiting for you in the universe
Hmm.
should you just surrender and accept it and just
Hmm.
like let presence flow, which
Hmm.
again is the frequency of love. Like
Hmm.
if you love yourself and you trust that things will work out, then abundance will flow and you don't have to
Yeah.
be attached. Just like I have to figure out, and get to a deeper place within myself of like, like my mom's physical self will one day be gone, but I have all of the love and the presence of the memories with her now that I will be okay because this is one experience in a lifetime of timelines.
Hmm.
And, how can you get in, like, stay in that resonance? And I think that is the human experience is exhausting.
Yeah.
Like, it's
Yeah.
just like, it's hard,
Hmm.
but we find the pieces of ourselves of like, where can I unconditionally learn to love myself more deeply? And where can I let go of attachments that don't serve me as I figure out what am I meant to be doing in this very short time that we have
Yeah.
here?
Yeah. It's pure faith. Pure
Yeah.
faith. Some call it manifestation, some call it, faith and prayer, some call it spells, that whole cliche. It's like it's pure faith to really acknowledge that we are fully supported right now, right? We are fully supported. creator, God, universe, whatever label you want to put on it, is good and will fully support it and fully guide it. When we get off kilter, it's like every ancient text talks about faith in different manners, right? And like obviously I resonate with Jesus and Yeshua, and it's like the faith the size of a mother's seed will move mountains. And it's like, what does that really look like? It's not sitting there praying like, thinking it, it's all the time, but like visualization and like really feeling it. There was that whole thing. I don't know if I ever shared this with you, and it was a cool contrast with me because it was definitely like Christian based podcast reel or something that came through, but they were really explaining on their dualities and polarities between their mindset. Was they would talk about this really high level warlock that you know started resonating with Christianity and so forth, and he was talking about how he would go to do curses and so forth, and he would sit out in the sun for I don't know how long, sometimes days on end, visualizing until he saw the curse being done. And this is a pretty polarized size of example, but it really resonated with me because it was like he would sit out in the sun and think about the curse and see about it happening, visualizing it, knowing that it's going to happen before he ever got up and do it. And they would say, like, how did you know the curse was going to work? He goes, I saw it. I knew it was going to happen. It's like,
Mhm.
what it shook me. It was like, okay, I've done affirmations, I've done mantras, I've spoken out, thank you in advance. I thank you for this money that's coming in. I've done some visualization practices, but I never sat with it that long to see it come to fruition and fully believe it and so forth. To where it really like rattled me too, to where it's like, do I truly believe that I'm supported? Do I truly believe that this is going to happen and so forth? Which I think is the most powerful way of faith and manifestation too, you know?
Yeah, because without faith, you can't manifest because
Right,
without faith, you have no trust and no belief, which
right.
means you don't love yourself enough to feel worthy to receive it.
Yeah. And we're still in fear. We're still in, conflicting beliefs or limiting mindsets and so forth. It's just like the worst, most challenging dark nights of the soul was me and my illusion of control not surrendering. And the minute I surrendered, everything came through. And I keep going through that journey, keep having to get remembered like go through remembrance pretty fast, but full faith and surrender, full presence.
Yeah. Being an indifference that no matter which path you take, it's not wrong. It's just an opportunity to learn a different lesson that will still weave you back exactly where you're supposed to go
You
and trusting
can't,
those paths.
yeah, we can't mess it up.
No.
There's no playbook to life, right? And I think that's the hardest thing with good intentions, that there's coaches, there's all these things out there, and everybody to learn from different archetypes and different individuals and different paths. But it's like there is no playbook for this. There is no controllables. Things can happen at the brink of a second that you can't control. The illusion of control is so far gone to where it's like really acknowledging, like, we're just babies here, figuring it out, and we can't mess it up. Anything that happened was supposed to happen because it didn't happen any other way. Everything is perfect. But it's like
Yep.
it really takes some pressure off to where it's like, yeah, we can't screw this up. Do we want to be guided? Yeah, but the disconnect of us having it figured out or this is the right pathway is really a dangerous slippery slope. We were talking about intuition just recently too, where I was like, sitting with you and I was like, there are things that I knew my intuition was so fired up. I thought I had the best intuition, right? And of course, like childhood development and so forth, I was always analyzing the room and so forth, looking for things that were going to fall out. And that's my own trauma to heal and work through. But I would literally see these scenarios where I'm like, I feel like this thing's gonna happen, like this bad thing. I'm like, I know what's gonna happen. Then it would happen. I'm like, dude, my intuition is dialed. I'm like, no, I probably created that. I absolutely manifested that in real time. And I've had multiple conversations. I had one with you, another dear friend of mine too, where I'm like, what's the difference between intuition and manifestation in real time? To where it's like I used to think I was somewhat of a foreseer or a prophet of something that was going to come. And I'm like, that's not it, dude. I've literally been creating pain and suffering because I was looking at the scenario rather than I don't know what can happen. And the most beautiful, expansive things can happen any moment. To where I'm like, literally, I'm like, if I'm in pure presence, it's like, okay, intuition that comes through in that moment. Is there something to say or something to do that's alive for me in that moment? But no longer forward and back. That I was so misconstrued on that. So I'm like, dude, I've literally been creating this whole time.
Right? But it goes to that whole thing where, someone could give you 100 compliments, but you remember the one negative thing.
Right.
And as we get older, it's so much easier to create scenarios that are on a negative or a more painful side because we're like, well, yeah, that makes sense. Of course, like I'm gonna suffer. Of course, this is gonna happen. But, as a kid, it's easier to be in like the pure happy imagination and manifestation. So it's like, how can you take that scenario that you've like created and you're like, oh, I'm like a seer, my intuition. It's like, no, it's just easier to focus on what would fall apart than what could be built, because then we're like, but what if it doesn't? Then I'm going to be disappointed and I've set myself
Hmm.
up and I had this expectation. And I hate when people say that. It's like with relationships, they're like, don't get your hopes up. What else am I supposed to do? Like you're telling me like, a business deal, an opportunity, a trip. Well, just be careful, have realistic expectations, just be prepared in case it doesn't. Why? I don't want to. Because then I'm telling myself it's possible, but maybe not because I might not deserve it later
Hmm.
down the road. It's like, no, I deserve
Yeah.
all of it. I want to focus like, creating that reality where the bad thing doesn't happen and my energy can go towards how easy it is to create the good thing. And like
Hmm.
that's where we like start to tap back into ourselves, because it's like
Hmm.
people, we've talked about this a million times. I'm so tired of people looking for signs. Like
Yeah.
not everything is a
Yeah.
sign. The dead
Yeah.
butterfly on the ground does not mean the death of your transformation. Like yes, there is power in symbols and recurring numbers, and a lot of that comes up when we're in a place that we need it, of struggle, of strife, and of
Hmm.
asking. But in our
Yeah.
day-to-day life, a lot of times, if you're not looking for it, like people are always like, if you look for it, you'll see it. You're looking because your soul needs it in that moment. It
Hmm.
needs the reminder. It needs to be
Yeah.
tapped back in to walk that clear path. But my logic is if I don't see it throughout the day, it's not because I'm disconnected. It's because there's nothing for me to see. I'm exactly
Yeah.
where I'm supposed to be. And in the
Yeah.
moment I'm not, my consciousness goes to it.
Yeah.
And then it's like, whoa, 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 where are you going? Let's come back over here. It's
Hmm.
always like signs and like symbols are redirects,
Right. Yeah.
but people get lost in them to validate like feelings of lesser vibrations
Yeah.
because they want to create something that's not there. And I'm like, it's
Yeah.
not, it's the same
Yeah.
with intuition.
Yeah. Deep shift with me because there's been definitely times where I'm externalizing, I'm seeking something outside of this moment or outside of self in that moment, externalizing it, right? So I know we can even be playful. Like there's been times where I've like attached if I'm not in my power and I'm like, oh, this is something, or this is something, or what's going to happen or speak, and these types of things. And I do feel like if we're fully in the present moment, and like I've had radical ceremonies that you know about where I've been deeply shaken to where it's like, stop seeking. Out of curiosity and presence, if something comes through, it can be amazing. But the worst thing in the world that I've ever had is like outside of me, like what's the sign and what's the regrip rather than just purely in this moment. I do think we have signs and synchronicities and so forth we hear, but I've been shooken in a really powerful way in ceremony one time that it was like stop seeking and pretty much felt disconnected from source in that moment because I was seeking externalization outside of self with my full connection with God as well. I do want to bounce back too because you gave that beautiful picture of like relationship, right? Where people
Mhm.
are like, guard your heart, guard your heart. And what's the worst that can happen is this really right and so forth, where it's like when any of those polarities that we talked about in emotionals, it's like if I want to sign on for joy, like before we came to this, 3D plane, if I want to sign on for joy and happiness, I'm signing on for the opposite polarity, or else we wouldn't feel it. And it's the same thing in relationship. It's like if we're gonna sign on that we want love and we want partnership and we want relationship, it's like you're signing on for pain and suffering. It's just part of the gig, right?
Mhm.
And like you've been through very extreme cases of pain and suffering relationships, so have I, and also I've caused a lot of it as well. But it's like once you move through that, that this is just part of the recipe. And if that comes through in that moment, okay, like handle how you feel like in that moment, in that pure presence and so forth. Hopefully it doesn't come through, but I can't imagine how much of that pain and suffering I caused by thinking that it was going to happen. And the energetics of is something bad going to happen and so forth, where you're literally throwing energy and manifesting it in real time. Something bad happens. It's like just acknowledge it's part of the game. What's the best that could happen? What's the worst that could happen? Right? It's like neither are bad, but also stay in the mindset. Why would I open up my heart or try to open my heart with someone and stay closed and think something bad's going to happen? I'm
Yeah.
literally going to sabotage it.
Yeah, because like they pick up on that energy. Like if you start to get cautious and edgy, you become quiet. And then they pick up on
Mhm.
that. They're like, what's wrong? What can
Mhm.
I do? Can I fix it? And then you're like, oh my God, you're being so annoying. Nothing is wrong. And they're like, something's wrong. And before you know it, you're in a fight and you're like, see, I knew this was gonna happen.
Mhm.
Yeah, dum dum. Look at
Yeah.
you. yesterday creating this story because of X, Y, and Z.
Hmm.
And like then it happens. And then you're like, oh, I knew this was going to happen to me. This always happens in relationships. Why do I
Hmm.
attract this cycle? And like it's not so much about attracting anything new. It's about what am I consistently cycling that's already in existence within my reality.
Yeah.
Like there
Yeah.
is nothing new. It's already been there. You're
Yeah.
just externalizing it.
Yeah. Why do we even seek a romantic relationship or any romantic relationship in general? I would tend to believe the first thing is connection,
Yeah.
right? And the minute that we are disconnected from self and we're doing that, it's disconnecting us from our partner, our friend, whoever we're in a relationship with, family member, and they can feel that. And then all of a sudden it turns into scarcity energy. It feels like disconnection. And when you feel disconnection with someone, then scarcity comes up. And then scarcity is a whole different energy. I like to use this in business and everything. It's like there's been programs that I put out in scarcity mode of, hey, this will drive some cash flow or something like that. It's been some of the worst things we've ever done rather than this is a creative expression idea that's alive for me that could be really cool. And all of a sudden it just pops up as the most successful thing in the world. But that in relationship is so powerful. Like I don't know if you ever felt that too with like your friends and stuff with you. Like you feel off, and then it gets weird, and then we start like self-analyzing what things we did wrong or what could we do better and stuff like that. And it's like it's all disconnection, like just oneness, you know? Um, yeah, I'm gonna cut that. I'm gonna have to clip that. So cut that tangent. I
Why?
just screwed up because I
No,
went
that was
blank.
good. I like
I
that
went
tangent.
blank.
No, because it makes because like that made me think of like, several friendships I've had because I've struggled in my female friendships because I've had women that have hurt me, betrayed me, used me, bullied me. So, and like being a woman, the feminine, like the energy for us of sisterhood is so important. Like, it's like the feminine witch wound, all of the things. And I can think of so many times in wanting to step into healthier friendships, but I'm like carrying this wound with me. And then I'm like looking for stuff and I'm anticipating and I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop. I'm like, at any moment, this woman's going to leave. Or, then you're like creating that line of separation where you think they've done something, you push. And you're like, well, fine. Well, I'm not going to talk to you until you're ready to talk to me. And then before you know it, 3 weeks have gone by and you're like, well, nothing happened per se. We just lost touch. And it's like, but
Hmm.
why did you lose touch? Was there anything that could have been done that
Hmm.
you were holding on to, a story and a narrative that then you like that played out in your life like a movie. And you're like,
Hmm.
yep, same old story. There it is, and I'm like, but it doesn't
Yeah.
have to be. And I'm still healing that within myself.
Yeah.
But
Been
I
been
think
there.
in relationship, when I think of relationships, and I keep going back to that, you know, like believing and dreaming that you deserve the happiness instead of focusing on the possibility of like, well, yeah, of course it's natural that this bad thing happened, because it always happens to me. And I've been trying to shift that within myself and getting really specific, because people will say, "Oh, well, have realistic expectations." But yet, on the flip side, people are like, get really specific about what you want, like to the T. Because if I say I want a spiritual man, I'll get spiritually egoic, spiritually narcissistic. Like, and they're like, oh, wait, I wasn't specific enough, So when people are constantly like, don't have expectations, like my expectations are my standards.
Yeah.
Those are the boundaries I set for myself that I will not allow anything that does not resonate in what I want to come forward. And if that means you can call it an expectation, you can call it a standard. In my mind, there's like they're all three the same thing. It's what do I desire for myself and I value that I deserve and I know I'm worth, again, right? Right back to worthiness. Like I am worthy of all of these things, and anything less than that is the boundary and the standard I set. And if you don't show up in that, then expect the door to close in your face.
Hmm.
So I think it's important to have expectations and boundaries because that's just letting yourself know how much you love yourself, that you won't take anything less than that.
Yeah. Yeah. And something that stands out right now too is like even in a position that we can be in gratitude for those experiences that don't feel like in alignment, right? Because it's like you can get really specific. And granted, we're at that age now where we've had different relationships and dated people and so forth that like, I feel like I'm definitely clear on like what I'm looking for in a partner and stuff too. But it's like without those other scenarios and contrasts, we don't know, right?
Yeah.
Like without the things that happen poorly or out of alignment that wasn't serving us, it's like we wouldn't know what we're really clear on manifestation, like manifesting in a partner anyway. and so forth too, to where it's like getting clear on manifestation. And then maybe it's like, hey, I'm helping universe is like, hey, I'm helping you get a little bit more clear with some of these sport experiences that are coming through too, to like
Yeah.
help you get really aligned on that as well.